Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Good morning. This is being shown on Shabbat, September the 6th. We are recording this on Wednesday, September the 3rd in the Rabbi Chill Sanctuary. Colleagues, it is so fabulous to be back together and so fabulous to be back with you. The content for today, I just encountered over the summer. I'm read a fabulous book called An Odyssey, A Father and a Son and an Epic by Daniel Mendelsohn. Just one of the best books I have read in a long time. And in the course of talking, Daniel Mendelsohn is a classic scholar, a Greek and Roman scholar. He talked about the legend of Icarus, which is a piece of Greek mythology. Icarus is the son of a master craftsman. And both the father, master craftsman, and the son Icarus are improperly imprisoned by an evil king. And according to the myth, the father, who's a master craftsman, uses materials that he can find in the prison, namely feathers and wax. And with feathers and wax, he creates wings for his son Icarus. And he says to his son, "Dear son, you can leave this prison, you can fly away with these special wings I made you of feather and wax. Just one thing, don't fly too low, because if you fly too low, the feather will get saturated with water from the oceans and the rain and the oceans, and it will weigh you down. And do not fly too high, because if you fly too high, the sun is going to melt the wax." And what the sun does is fly too high. He flies too high. He just is so exhilarated by flight. And of course, the sun flies too high, and the sun, S-U-N, melts the wax. And so the sun, S-O-N, falls to earth and falls into a body of water and drowns. That's the legend of Icarus, the boy who flew too high. And in the book, An Odyssey, Daniel Mendelsohn brings a painting, which is here and which is also in the first copy, the first page in your packet, by Peter Bruegel the Elder from the Netherlands. He painted it in 1560, and that painting hangs from right now in a museum in Brussels. And the minute I saw this painting and read what Daniel Mendelsohn had to say about it, I just felt this encapsulates the human condition. This is your story, my story, this is our story, and I thought it would be such a perfect first class and also a perfect segue to the Jewish high holidays. So colleagues, let's thank God for the gift of learning Torah together. Birkat HaTorah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. V'harevna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu ובפי עמך בית ישראל, ונהיה אנחנו וצאצאינו וצאצאי עמך בית ישראל, כולנו יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה. Baruch atah Adonai hamalamed Torah la'amo Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Okay, so I thought we'll just jump into the Icarus story and to Peter Bruegel's masterpiece, painted in 1560, with Daniel Mendelsohn's half-page discussion of it. So, Eliza, this is page 3 of the handout, and if you can just start reading the most famous example.
The most famous example of this visual sleight of hand is a painting called Landscape with the Fall of Icarus by the Netherlandish master Peter Bruegel, which hangs in a museum in Brussels and takes as its subject another of antiquity's many father-son dramas, the myth of the great inventor Daedalus and his son Icarus, who sought to fly on artificial wings made of feathers bound by wax. In the best-known version of the myth, which appears in a poem by Ovid, Daedalus warns his son not to fly too high, since the sun's warmth will melt the wax. But the heedless son, giddy with excitement, disobeys his father, soars too high, loses his wings, and crashes into the sea. With poignant irony, Bruegel's canvas illustrates the split second in time just after Icarus has fallen. The painting is almost entirely taken up by the shore and the sea, and especially by 3 peasants who go about their business, plowing, herding, and fishing, utterly unaware of the catastrophe, the only sign of which is a tiny detail off in the corner, which turns out to be poor Icarus's legs, waggling pathetically just above the waterline. In Bruegel's hands, Ovid's tale of his son's willful rejection of his father's wisdom becomes a story about the need for a kind of humility, for you might say perspective, an admonition about what we miss when we are intent on our own narratives, about the dangers of mistaking the foreground for the whole picture.
Thank you, Lisa. So if you take a look at the painting, you have in the lower right-hand part of the painting, Icarus. Icarus's story was all important to Icarus. What a story. He got out of prison. He had these artificial wings made by his dad. So cool. He just loved soaring and flying until the sun melted his wings and he fell into the ocean. To Icarus, nothing is more important than Icarus. But the painting is not called Icarus, nor is it called The Death of Icarus, nor is it called Icarus Falls Down from the Sky. It is called Landscape with the Fall of Icarus. The Fall of Icarus is only one small part of it. There's a whole world out there. You have these three peasants who are all doing their thing, plowing and herding and so forth, and they don't seem to know or care about Icarus. Before we just react to it, I wanted to just also go to the poem that William Carlos Williams wrote, which is on page 4. Michelle, would you read that for us? Landscape with the Fall of Icarus. He puts into poetry what Bruegel puts on the canvas.
According to Bruegel, when Icarus fell, it was spring. A farmer was plowing his field. The whole pageantry of the year was awake, tingling near. The edge of the sea concerned with itself, sweating in the sun that melted the wings' wax. Unsignificantly, off the coast, there was a splash quite unnoticed. This was Icarus drowning.
Right, a splash quite unnoticed. This was Icarus drowning. So, first of all, friends, what comes up for you when you encounter this painting, landscape with the Fall of Icarus? You see the pathetic legs as he's drowning. You see the indifference of the peasants. And then William Carlos Williams, last stanza, splash quite unnoticed. This was Icarus drowning. What does it say to you? What comes up for you?
I love how you started today, Wes, talking about the fact that Icarus, it was all about Icarus, it was all about him. And this painting really exemplifies that completely in the sense that there's tragedy around us all the time, every moment. And how many of us really pay attention to it unless it happens to be close to us, either personal or, related to whatever whatever's happening in the world. Then we get up in the morning and we go about our business. And there could be some major tragedy. And if you happen to not turn on the news, you just don't even know what's going on. Mm.
So it's interesting for me because it feels physically impossible for Icarus to remain in this position with his legs waggling above the water, as the text says, for a long period of time, because your body has like airs in your lungs, like you would flip over. So it feels like this is the moment of entry into the water. And it makes me wonder what happens right after that, because just because nobody notices him falling doesn't mean they don't hear the splash. One of the peasants, the one that's down by the water fishing, probably sees it, because if you're fishing, you're listening for splashes and looking for things affecting the water. So this feels like the moment before. Now, I don't know what happens. Like, do they continue to ignore him? I don't know, but this feels like the moment of potential where you either have the option to stay immersed in your own reality and totally miss the tragedy unfolding next to you, or you have the moment to sweep into action, and we just don't know what's going to happen.
So in other words, you're saying that William Carlos Williams' last stanza, a splash quite unnoticed, might not have been so. You have a more optimistic Perush. Maybe this peasant who's doing the fishing actually does bestir himself to care.
Well, it's not just care. Like, you can't fish very well if you don't listen for splashes. So, like, if he's actually fishing, he's paying attention.
Elias?
For me, I don't want to spoil your class, but later on we are going to talk about, if not now, when.
Right.
And this to me seems that, this is a moment. Are you going to take action and do something good for the world, and even for these men, or not? If not now, when?
So thank you for bringing that up, Elias. If you would read, I think William Carlos Williams and this Peter Bruegel's painting suggests that human indifference is the human story. Human indifference is the human story. What I thought about, and I was actually reading this book, and I encountered this passage July 4th weekend, which was the weekend of the horrendous flooding in Texas, when so many people, including so many young people, lost their lives, and it was the 4th of July. And as you know, it's my favorite text, Catherine Schultz's book, Lost and Found, Life is an And Machine, that both of these things were true at the same time. Horrific, tragic, catastrophic flooding with unimaginable loss of life. And the 4th of July, best weekend of the year, highlight of the summer, yay, let's barbecue, let's party. And both of these, the catastrophe of flooding in Texas and the reality of most people's energy who didn't happen to lose a loved one in the flooding, was the 4th of July. This is what we live for. Let's go to the Cape. Let's go to New Hampshire. Let's go to wherever it is that we do summer. And let's go to the Berkshires. Let's go to Tanglewood. And both these at the same time. And so in the mix of this problem, human indifference is the human story. We're focused on, like we read, and this is Dan, your comment, we read the story, we see the story on the 4th of July, oh, that's terrible. And now where are we going, honey? Where are we going for dinner? And that story, that human story is human indifference, Hillel walks into that reality and has words. So Elias, would you read for us? We're on page 8 of the handout, the famous teaching of Hillel. This was another favorite teaching of Hillel's.
This was another favorite teaching of his. If I'm not for me, who will be? If I'm for myself alone, what am I? And if not now, when?
So, Elias, what does Hillel's teaching say to you, and what does it say to you about the fall of Icarus?
Well, I want to turn this a little bit personal because, as you mentioned before, we are approaching the high holidays, and each one of us, at least every year, I try to assign myself with some spiritual assignment, all right, to carry on. And in this day and age, and everything that is going in the world with Israel and with anti-Semitism, it's difficult for me. I need my spiritual homework is try to find again the inner good that is in me, the inner good that goes and help people. Because when you read the news, when you listen to any famous person saying Israel is committing genocide from the river to the sea, you know, when everybody's turning against you, where does it leave the room for you to do good to others? You know, so that's something that I need to grow. When somebody hates you, you say, oh, I hate you back because you hate me. You don't respect me. You don't see who I am. I'm Icarus, all right? But then I don't want to be that.
But isn't there, like, in that, there's the challenge and the tension, which is, are we being the peasants watching the news and watching everybody starving in Gaza? Are we being the peasants? Like, who is Icarus in our story? And that feels important to ask. Are we, and you know, what's interesting about these peasants is they're going about their day, they're engaged in tasks, but are we willfully ignoring?
Except for, so that brings up something in this painting that really stood out at me the second or third time that I saw it. The first time I saw it, I saw people going about their tasks and doing their thing. And then this poem that you had brought, the second one that we didn't yet read,
Sure.
Speaks about the ship and that, you know, the ship was too busy. And I asked myself sort of, is that really true? And I'm happy to pause for the poem.
Why don't we
then,
pause and
okay,
read it?
And then I'll share what I
read on
noticed.
page 6. This is another poem by W.H. Auden, also about the same subject. So please go.
About suffering, they were never wrong. The old masters, how well they understood its human position, how it takes while someone else
How it takes place.
How it takes place while someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking dully along. How, when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth, there will always be children who did not specially want it to happen, skating on a pond at the edge of the wood, they never forgot that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course. Anyhow, in a corner, some untidy spot where the dogs go on their doggy life and the torturer's horse scratches its innocent behind on a tree. In Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. The plowman may have heard the splash, the forsaken cry, but for him it was not an important failure. The sun shone, as it had to, on the white legs disappearing into the green water. And the expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere to get to and sailed calmly on.
So what do you think Auden is saying, and how does it connect?
So what I think he's saying is that everybody is sort of willfully ignoring this, and that leads into Elias's challenge, right? How do we exist in a world where what matters to us doesn't seem to matter to others? But as I was wondering, it caused me to wonder about it, right? It precisely maybe to Elisa's point, it feels like they must have heard, they must have seen. How could they not have? And yet, other than the fisher person, although he's not turned in that direction, he's turned facing sort of downward. I wonder, did they hear above all the din of the sails and the wind and the whatever, did they actually notice that? And this caught my attention. This gentleman in the middle, he's actually, the plowman is involved in his task, and the fisherman is involved in his task. But what's this guy doing?
The middle one.
The middle guy, he's looking up. And it felt to me, I don't know, it just sort of called to me that he was sort of looking for something, reaching for something, trying to see something. And like that epic tale of Icarus, like taking place, he's looking for his own cosmic drama.
Is this a Psalm 121 moment?
Like he's reaching for something.
Where will my help come from?
Right. Like and his narrative.
I love your optimism, Michelle. I love your optimism. Maybe it's enjoying the spring day.
No, he's
like this, looking at the sun. But I want to go back, if you allow me, Wes, to respond to Elisa, because
but let Michelle finish her point. Let Michelle finish her point,
and then we'll come back. But she changed the topic while we were talking about
don't worry,
something
I'll
else.
come back to it.
We'll come back.
I promise you.
I feel like in his reaching, in his aspiration, is I think to me, one of the core tragedies of Icarus, which is that it's not that we're willfully not noticing or not caring. We are trying to aspire to something bigger, but we're not always part of the big story. So we don't always see where we can contribute or how we could make a difference.
Thank you. Let me thank you for that. Let me build on that and come back to your kind of machloket l'shem shamayim, a principal disagreement. What I'm hearing is two different points of view on the question, who are we in this painting? Are we Icarus who's drowning, or are we the three peasants who are not seeing Icarus drowning? And there's 2 points of view. Elias, what I hear you saying is, we're Icarus drowning. We're Jews in an age of rising anti-Semitism, where it seems like the whole world hates the Jewish people, the Jewish state, Am Yisrael, Medinat Yisrael, and to say out loud, I am a proud Zionist and I am a lover of Israel is inflammatory language in this day and age. And in that day and age, we're Icarus, because nobody sees and nobody cares about October 7th. Nobody sees and nobody cares about the hostages who are still stuck. It's actually politically inappropriate to care about the hostages in so many circles. In America, that means you're a crazy right-wing Israel Zionist fanatic if you still care about the hostages. We are Icarus, and the rest of the world that hates the Jewish people are the peasants. That's one perspective. The other perspective, Elisa, that I hear from you is, whoa, that's just way oversimplistic. Actually, there's actual famine and actual starvation happening in Gaza. There's literally no doubt that that is true. There's zero dispute that starvation and famine are happening in Gaza. Even Danny Gordis, who's hardly a lefty, in his latest podcast just made that observation. No one in Israel. This is Danny's latest podcast, so don't email me. Listen to Danny Gordis. Danny's latest podcast is literally no one in Israel disputes that there is famine in Gaza. At most is a conversation about where it came from and who's responsible, etc. But the fact that it exists, and weren't we the three peasants who just did not see and did not care? So you have two very different reads on who are the peasants and who's Icarus. Dear colleagues, continue.
No, I was going to say, you put it so well in words. You should be a rabbi. That every coin has two sides,
Yes.
and sometimes we see things and we are stuck with that vision, but sometimes because of what's going on, we can see the other view as well and even sympathize with that thing. So this is such a fabulous painting because I see the first thing that comes to me if I compare this painting with the reality. To me, Icarus are the hostages.
Right.
Icarus are the hostages. Eviatar, that young man in the cave digging his own. Okay,
Yes.
Icarus is the hostages. To me, there is no other view of saying it. But I understand, Alisa, your view as well. And I understand. There was a case last night. I was hearing the radio that Coldplay was playing, and another Coldplay moment. And the Martin, I think, is the singer. He invites somebody from the audience to come and say something. So she comes up and he interviews her. Where are you from? Silence. And she says, I'm from Israel. All right? And then there was mixed things, and then he says something about Palestine. But the point is that they interview her after. And she said, I hesitate saying that I'm from Israel for being afraid to get killed after the concert.
Right.
And she ended up saying it. We cannot live in the world like that. And then going back to my spiritual thing is why, and I'm working with this and I'm fighting myself with this, why should I go out and help people? If not now, when? When everybody hates me.
But
Elisa?
So I want to just come back to the painting because I think the tension between are we Icarus, are we the peasants is really super important. And what's so fascinating about this painting, as is pointed out in the text that we've read, is that the main focus of the painting is neither Icarus nor the peasants. They're all part of the painting, but the overall focus is landscape. Landscape with the fall of Icarus. It's not the fall of Icarus. It's not the peasants' indifference to Icarus. It's landscape. There's a whole other world. And I think that world, that's Hillel's world, which is to say, the landscape that we're operating in, the landscape that we're dealing with is how do you balance your own feeling of being a persecuted minority, your own feeling of being unseen, your own feeling of suffering, your own personal tragedy that no one else knows of, with the reality that you are definitely ignoring somebody who's suffering. You are definitely not seeing somebody. You are definitely failing to be someone's hero in every moment. Where's that balance? How do we find that balance? And what's the spiritual work so that we can actually refocus on the whole picture?
Which just brings us to the high holidays coming up. And I'm so curious about how this tension, are we the peasants, are we Icarus? And of course, Michelle, the answer is yes, and we're both three. We are both the peasants because, but actually Danielle Hartman and Yossi Klein Halevi did a really searing podcast in July called Famine, where Danielle says, Chatanu, we sinned. And Danielle Hartman and Yossi Klein Halevi, both, and they have different perspectives. I've listened to every one of their podcasts, but they agree that the famine in Gaza is a moral stain on Israel, it's a moral stain on Zionism, it's a moral stain on Judaism, and Chatanu, we sinned. And then the question was, where did it come from, and how did it happen, and what do we do about it? But that's part of the landscape. That's our landscape for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur 2025. So my question for you is, and the hostages aren't back, and it's bleak, and it's depressing, and to Danny Gordis's last podcast, everyone in Israel is beyond exhausted, and we're beyond exhausted in doing this. So my question, and we'll come around to all of you, is what speaks to you from the high holiday liturgy, from the high holiday pageantry, from the high holiday ritual, that allows us to figure out this peasants or Icarus or the landscape with the fall of Icarus? What speaks to you from the holidays that allows us to find our voice here?
Well, the first thing, I just want to respond to Elias's last statement, which is, and I think this really goes back to the holidays. You're saying, I believe what you were saying is, why should I, be cognizant and helpful to other people when the world is really against us? And that goes really to the opposite of what Judaism is all about. To me, anyway, and I'm thinking also, like, to respond to your question, Wes, to me, there's no question that the tefillah is unatana tokef, because it really focuses on the landscape. What is our world? What is our personal world? What is the world we live in? And what is God's response, and what is our response to God's response? And it's such a beautiful crafted tefillah that brings all of that into focus.
There are so many. Sorry, I'll be short. There are so many prayers that speak to me in this moment. Al chet shechatarnu lefanecha. Definitely what you were saying.
For the sin that we have sinned before you.
Yeah. No question about it. That's something that we should look deeper this year specifically. Avinu Malkeinu, Asei Manu Tzedaka V'Chesed, and
Our Father, our Sovereign, do for us. Give us the ability to redeem ourselves through good deeds.
Exactly. How do you, those two, to me, speak very highly.
So I think that it is, just picking up on your landscape, jumped out at me before I get to the high holidays, is the literal landscape, not just the figurative landscape. And these birds here that are flying in sort of direct relationship to Icarus drowning. The birds naturally fly. They fly. That's what they do. They don't have to strive. It's not about their humility. It's not about their discipline. It's not about their seeing each other or not seeing each other. Nature goes on. And it feels to me there's a little bit of Hannah Senesh and the Eli Eli kind of a feeling there. My God, these things continue in the world, right? Like the crash of the waves, that while all of this suffering, the context for that beautiful song is the horrific destruction that our people faced in World War II. And all of that had gone on while the waves continue to crash and the sun continues to shine, and all of that continues to happen. And so to me, the text from the High Holidays that this so evokes for me is Abraham and the two lads, right? Abraham and Isaac are up there in their cosmic drama, and sitting at the base of the mountain are the people who are just watching the donkey. They're not part of that cosmic drama. And it leads to me the question, the people on the ship, right, if they saw and they're just moving on, like in that poem, then shame on them. Shame on them. They should be doing al chet shechatati and trying to work through that. But what if their focus, their task, their job in that mission called them to be looking into a different place? And I struggle with that. Or what's our spiritual mission? Where are we meant to be looking and focusing our energy at this time?
So Wes, one little thing that continue with our imagination. Suppose that we follow the lead of Aliza, that suppose that Icarus doesn't die and he survives. The question is he going to be doing a chet shechatati because he didn't listen to his father?
Right. Aliza, what's the message of the High Holidays for you this year?
So the holidays feel so weird to me this year, heading into the High Holidays, in that it's
You won't be singing.
I'm not going to be singing. I mean, I'll be singing, but to myself. But it's also just, it feels like a very wild thing to be in a process where my whole being is getting ready for this baby, and there's also the High Holidays that are happening, and so it's like in many ways I'm living this, except that it's the High Holidays drowning, and I'm just like
Hayom Harat Olam.
Right.
Yes. and so that's just it feels very strange. I've never in my life not been like fully focused on high holidays and high holiday preparation, and that has been sort of like overtaken by what's happening in my body and in our family, and that's a wild thing. And I think for me, what comes up is actually not even liturgy. It's the guttural cry of the shofar. It's the sound that is itself designed from, you could say designed from indifference, right? Like we take an animal and we use its body to create a sound that will help us to wake up. And when we hear the shofar, it's not, are we thinking about it as a ram's horn? Maybe, but like primarily we're thinking about it as an agent to wake us up. And so there's a way in which we have the potential that our insensitivity to it, our indifference to suffering, can sometimes help us, can sometimes awaken us to the potential and power that we have to make a difference in the world. And that's something that I'm really thinking about this year, that I'm going to be listening to the cry of the shofar, but I'm also going to be listening to the cry of a tiny human, and responding to all of those things, and what are the tools that we have to awaken ourselves to be able to listen.
Well,
What
that's so
about you, Wes?
interesting.
Would like to hear your opinion.
Yeah, thank you, Eliza. I actually want to pivot a lot, Eliza, off your last very evocative comment, the cry of a young baby and the cry of the shofar. I want to name what I'm feeling inside, and also what I sense, what I feel is commonly held, at least in the world that I know here at Temple Emmanuel and among Israelis. I was with 52 Israelis last weekend, and talked to them all at length about what's 2 years after October 7th today. Here's what I'm feeling, which is, we're in the second year now, almost second year anniversary of October 7th. And what I'm sensing is just utter exhaustion, saturation, and depression. They're tired of fighting this war. We're tired of fighting the collateral war against anti-Semitism and in support of Zionism. And also, so many of us are deeply conflicted and confused about what Israel is doing and why. In fact, Israelis are deeply conflicted and confused about what its government is doing and why. And the war continuing and the hostages unreturned and all of it, that confusion and consternation and saturation and depression and exhaustion and bleakness and hopelessness, that it doesn't change. What I'm feeling for myself first is it causes me to turn inward. Like, what's the opposite of all that? It's my granddaughter. What's the opposite of all that? It's my granddaughter. Like, when I think about holding my granddaughter, pure joy. When I think about the world, opposite of pure joy. And consequently, there's just this energy after 2 years of hitting our head against the wall, of going inward. And that came up for me when you were talking about the cry of a baby and the cry of the shofar. And I'm wondering, I want to just surface as a question, do you yourself also find a tendency to want to retreat inward to home and hearth? Because after all, the cry of a baby you can control. Your baby cries and you can take care of that baby's needs and bring them from tears to serenity and maybe even a smile. And our home and hearth, we have a modicum of control over. The world, we don't have control over. And I'm wondering, how are you thinking about, are you feeling a desire to head back home, and your internal energy, your moral energy, your psychic energy goes to home and hearth? And if so, are you okay with it?
Yeah, so it's a little bit what I said before, my spiritual homework. And all of us, I think, have a little bit of what you're having. My summers specifically, I try to enjoy nature as much as possible, enjoy my sons, do sports with them, do music, and try to read the news as little as possible. Because you used to say it before, indigestion, that gives
Right.
you pit in your stomach to read everything that's going on. But again, I'm fighting myself with that natural tendency to go inner, go inside me and not to do anything.
Mm.
I would say the same thing that Elisha said. Really, but actually, kind of, it's really both. For me, I do want to retreat inward, but I think also that being careful that if I do that completely, then I'm not actually fulfilling my mandate as a Jew, which is to be proactive for Tikkun Olam, which is really what the holidays are all about as well.
I think there's something so interesting in the morality play of Icarus, right? The classic story is he doesn't listen, he gets too close to the sun. It's his hubris, he deserves it. He needed humility. And this painting is the ultimate affirmation of that kind of humility move. You have to have humility, so much humility that your story doesn't even matter. Not at all. Nobody even notices. And I'm feeling a little torn by that morality play, because I think at the High Holidays, we work so hard to cultivate a sense of humility, but there also is a call to us that we have enough hubris to keep ourselves in the picture. And so I think thank you for bringing the painting, because it's an invitation for each of us to think about the role of our own hubris and humility at this season, and especially as we face world events and home and hearth, and how we balance those.
Thank you, Michelle. Aliza, last word.
The home and hearth question is fascinating, because we're at a stage so it's hard to get out of home and hearth, because every minute is Eder, Dada, Mama, come now, and I need you, and very focused. At the same time, it's really interesting to see what he picks up and what he notices that we don't realize that he's noticing. He started the summer walking up the stairs, I guess the way that I do, which is every stair. And so I think that this question of balance, like, I think there's a way to do home and hearth that is home and hearth focused on opening your doors and welcoming people in. That's home and hearth that's focused on not allowing ourselves to be indifferent. That's home and hearth that's focused on the pain of the world, and on using the tools that we have, whether that's prayer or whether that's resources or whether that's action, to make a difference. And I think that's the space of this painting for me. It's the landscape. It's how do we set our landscape for the year so that we're taking care of our landscape, we're taking care of the global landscape, and we're working to make sure that our hearts are not indifferent.
Amen. Shabbat shalom.